On this channel, I spend a lot of time talking about the price of certain guitars, whether or not certain high-priced guitars are worth it, not buying traditional just because the name on the headstock, and all of that stuff. But today, I'm going to introduce you to one guitar that I bought entirely for the name on the headstock, entirely based on emotion, and just because I had to have it for nostalgia reasons. And that guitar is this. The Parker Southern Nitefly. I bought this guitar just because I saw it as a child and I said I need to have it. And this guitar also happens to be fairly rare in terms of different Parker Nitefly models. And the reason it's rare is because these rarely come for sale at a very good price, which makes them annoying to buy. And even when they do come up for sale at a high price, you very rarely see them in this absolutely beautiful color. On camera, it looks like white, but really it has a bit of purple in there. It has a bit of pink over this lovely ash body. So in this video, I'm going to tell you about this guitar, the Parker Southern Nitefly, how it relates to all of the other Parker guitars, its history, my personal history with this guitar, and also why this is actually not my first, but my second version of this guitar. And the funny thing is, in one of my prior podcasts, by the way, subscribe to the Guitarcraft and Other Stuff podcast and the Guitarcraft newsletter, both linked below. But in one of those older podcasts, I talked about Tele guitars. And I could never understand why certain Tele guitars are, maybe $2,000, $3,000 unless they have special features. And of course, this Tele guitar does have special features. We'll get into all of that detail in the video. So first things first, we need to talk about where this guitar fits in Parker history. And broadly speaking, there's essentially two major eras of Parker guitars. There is the Ken Parker era. And during the Ken Parker era, we got this guitar, the Parker Fly. We got the Parker Nitefly. And then all of the Parker Fly variations like the Spanish Fly, the Nylon Fly, the Acoustic Fly. I forget what they were all called, but we got all of those standard Parker Fly guitars. But in terms of solid body electric guitars, we got mostly the Fly and the Nitefly and its different variations. Now, in the early 2000s, when Ken Parker left the company took a whole different approach to producing guitars. And one of the things that they did was try to make the Parker idea, the Parker guitar style, more palatable to a vast array of players. And so they had a very simple approach to this. They kept the standard Parker Fly for the most part, a few changes to it, but it was always there. And they kept the Nitefly for the most part, a few changes, but it was always there. But then they decided that they needed to make essentially a Les Paul version of a Parker guitar for Les Paul fans. And they needed to make a Telecaster version of a Parker Fly for Telecaster fans. And as you can see, that's what we have here. This is essentially a Parker Nitefly guitar, like that one right there, except it is a Tele version of it. So we have the two pickups, the Tele pickguard, kind of a Tele bridge, individual saddles, but you get the idea. But the thing that makes this a Parker guitar is, of course, we have the carbon fiber fretboard, we have the stainless steel frets, locking tuners, and we have the piezo bridge so we can get acoustic tones. And we'll get into all of the electronics and all of that stuff a bit later, but just understand in terms of Parker history, this is a guitar that came after Ken Parker left the company. And among Parker Fly, Parker fans, it's sometimes sacrilege to say that you enjoy some of the post-Ken Parker guitars, but I don't mind saying it. I like some of the guitars that came after Ken Parker, like this one. And the reason I like some of these guitars is because you have to remember, when I first learned about Parker guitars, Ken Parker was already gone from the picture. I started playing guitar in 2004. I didn't get my first electric guitar until 2005, 2006 or so. So by the time I was into the whole phase of looking up all the different guitar brands, looking up all the guitars I'm going to buy one day, by the time I got there, we're talking 2, 3, 4 years after Ken Parker was out of the picture in terms of the Parker company. And so the first time I saw a Parker Fly guitar, it was in an ad, and it had all of these beautiful guitars like this one. It had the Southern Nitefly, it had the Parker Fly Mojo single cut, it had the standard Parker Fly, and it had the Parker Nitefly. And at that age, I was thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to become a great guitar player, so I'm going to need my Telecaster, I'm going to need my Stratocaster, I'm going to need my Les Paul. Those were kind of the three solid body electric guitars that I knew, or at least I thought at the time, that I had to have to be a real guitarist. And as you may be able to tell, even back then, I was kind of contrarian. I didn't want to just have the same guitars that everyone else had. Mind you, I couldn't afford any of these guitars at the time, especially not these guitars. But point being, when I first saw the Parker guitars, I saw the Tele version and I said, oh my God, one day I'll have this as my Tele. I saw the Les Paul version and said, one day that will be my Les Paul. And I saw the Super Strat version, the Nitefly, and said that will be my guitar one day as well. And of course, you have to have the classic Parker Fly because it's the classic Parker Fly. Now, as I mentioned before, this was not my first Parker Southern Nitefly. I bought my first one maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, but that one was very, very flawed, and let me explain why. At the time, I had been looking for one of these for a very, very long time because I was obsessed with the Nitefly. I already learned that I didn't love the Fly because of the thin neck, and so I wanted to get every version of the Nitefly because this has the same neck as that guitar. So I was searching online for a Parker Southern Nitefly. We're talking 2, maybe 3 years, and eventually one that looked almost exactly like this came up. The only issue, and this is kind of a big issue, they didn't want the piezo system, so they completely removed that for some strange reason. They changed the pickups to just a Fender noiseless Tele set, which sounded good, but it wasn't original. And they changed this whole switch along with the system, and it looked different. And the pickguard as well. And the thing is that guitar looked so beautiful that I wanted to get it, even though it wasn't stock. And part of the reason I bought it, even though it wasn't stock, is because these are really hard to get. And they're especially hard to get in this color. And this was the color that I wanted. I didn't want the blonde traditional Tele color. I wanted this beautiful white, pinkish, purplish, ash through the paint color. So I bought the guitar. I then bought the whole Ghost saddle acoustic system, and I had that installed in the guitar. I also bought another Fender noiseless pickup and put it in the middle position so that I can do the whole 3-position Tele pickup thing. And I had that guitar. I even got a black volume knob to match the black saddles. And I thought that guitar looked absolutely stellar. It looked really cool. It had a wide variety of tones. And I felt like that my journey with the Nitefly was complete because I got my Southern Nitefly. But here's the thing. If you know anything about me, you know that I really love using a floating bridge. And when I don't have a guitar with a floating bridge, I pretty much never play it. And that's what happened to my first Southern Nitefly. I had it for about 6 or 7 months, and it was basically just sitting in the corner as I played my Niteflies because it does not have a floating bridge. And after a certain period of time, I couldn't justify in my heart keeping the guitar just because I thought it looked cool. So I put it up for sale. Someone bought it fairly quickly, and that was the end of that guitar. And pretty much the second I sold it, I regret it. Because although I didn't play it a lot, I had this really deep emotional connection to the idea of having a Southern Nitefly, even though it is a refined era Parker guitar. And so a couple of months ago, I even messaged the guy who I sold it to. I said, listen, I'll buy it back from you right now. I'll even pay you more than what I sold it to you for. And he was like, nope, I got no desire to sell this guitar back to you. I love it. I'm keeping it. And that was pretty heartbreaking for me. And so I started my search again for another Southern Nitefly. And the thing about these guitars is that they'll come up for sale every now and then on Reverb, but whenever they come up, it's never this color, and it's always way, way too expensive. But after a couple of months of checking, and I'll tell you one of my Reverb secrets, if you ever wake up in the middle of the night to pee around like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m., look on Reverb because there are some guitars that get posted there from different countries that people will buy right away before you even get to checking Reverb in the morning. So there's a secret tip for you. But point being, I got up in the middle of the night. I saw this one for sale in Japan, and the price wasn't great, especially because this neck that came with it, they described it as being permanently bowed and with the truss rod not being functional. And so I saw this guitar for a substantial amount of money. Even with the neck messed up, it was still pretty expensive. But I decided that, you know what, I'm going to buy it from Japan. I'm going to pay the VAT tax and all of that stuff. I'm going to have to replace the neck potentially, but I need to have it. And this version, as you can see, is pretty much exactly stock. It has the original pickups, it has the original pick guard, and all of that stuff. So I bought it anyway, and luckily for me, even though the neck isn't perfect, it does work fine for how I like to play a guitar like this. So the setup is already good. The neck adjustments don't need to be made because I like the way it's playing. And if I ever do need to change the neck, if I ever do want to change the relief and the action and all of that stuff, I happen to have a spare neck in my closet because that's the type of person I am when it comes to Parker instruments. Okay, so now let's talk about all of the specs on this guitar, and then I'll give you some tones and I'll send you on your merry way. So just like every other Parker guitar, we have spurs locking tuners. And in terms of the neck, we have the neck that comes on the Nitefly model because this is a Southern Nitefly. So it's pretty thick, it's nice. We have our glued on stainless steel frets like always and our carbon fiber fingerboard like always. In terms of the body, this is the thinnest version of the Nitefly body because as I mentioned in my full Nitefly video, which you can watch up here, the different eras of the Nitefly had different bodies. They started pretty thick. This one is the oldest version, it's the most thick. Then they got slightly thinner. My number one guitar right here has this slightly thinner body than the original. And then we have this version, which is the absolute thinnest, which I like quite a lot. The ash is really, really beautiful. In the grain of the wood itself, it looks purple because of the paint job. And it does have this slight pink hue overall. Of course, we have standard Tele pickups, and we have a black pickguard. And this black pickguard is actually a little bit different. It's hard for me to explain. I don't know what the material is. It's just slightly different to every other type of pickguard that we usually get on this style of guitar. Now, in terms of the electronics, we of course have our piezo bridge, so this we can get acoustic sounds out of it. And then we have our three-way switch for the bridge. So in the up position, it's just the magnetic pickups, middle position, magnetic and piezo. The bottom position, just piezo. And then we have our normal Tele three-way switch. We have a volume, master tone, and then a volume knob for the piezo bridge. Teles are, of course, very versatile guitars, but in terms of the way I like to use them, I think they're really, really beautiful for rhythm tones. So we'll start with the magnetic pickups, and then I'll show you some of the other unique tones we can get with the piezo bridge. Now, the bridge pickup on a Tele is of course very sharp and very attack heavy, so I really like using this when I'm doing a lot of percussive stuff with my right hand and rhythm playing. And the whole thing about the bridge pickup is that you don't really want to use that with the piezo bridge because both of those tones are very sharp. So magnetic pickups, bridge only, keep that by itself, you'll get a beautiful tone, of course. Now the middle position, the neck and the bridge pickup combined, has that classic funky Tele sound. And finally, the neck pickup on a Tele has a really beautiful, warm, jazzy tone, but I prefer to roll the bass off to about 6 when I'm doing that and the volume down to maybe about 8. a really nice mixed tone is to keep that same warm, jazzy feel, roll the bass down a bit even more. But since we're rolling the bass down, we don't want it to get too muddy, so we add in the piezo bridge, and that adds a bit of shine, a bit of brightness to the tone, and it sounds really, really nice. And of course we have the full piezo sound that imitates an acoustic guitar. We're going to change the patch on the Axe effects and get a nice acoustic setting here. And there is one weird quirk about these knobs. These are the hardest knobs to turn I have ever experienced in my life. So if you like that whole pinky volume swell thing, you're not going to want to use these pots. You probably have to change them, but I never do that anyway, and so these are pretty much fine for me. So I'm in the middle of editing the video and I realized I forgot to mention one thing. This of course uses a 9-volt battery to power the piezo bridge. That being said, if the 9-volt battery dies, you do not have access to the magnetic pickups. So even if you're not using the piezo bridge, you need a 9-volt battery at all times to get any sound out of this guitar. Keep that in mind as well. The strings go through the body like a regular Tele, and we don't have the ability to make this a top loading Tele because we need a certain amount of pressure going down on the bridge in order for the piezo system to work. And so as a result, we just have the string through option, but of course that is going to be totally fine. And going back to the logic of purchasing certain guitars, when you look at the Fly and when you look at the Nitefly, they both have the ability to float, and you can also turn them into a bend down only version. And so logically speaking, there's no reason to actually have a fixed bridge guitar. At least that's what I was thinking about before, which is why one of the reasons why I sold it the first time, in addition to never actually playing it. But if you've ever had a guitar that has a fixed bridge, you will know from experience, just because a bridge is fixed, or just because a floating bridge, you set it to the fixed mode, that doesn't mean it feels exactly the same as a real fixed bridge without springs. Having springs in the guitar does give you a slightly different feel, a slightly more bendy feel, and when you don't have those springs and it's just right through the body, at least for me personally, I feel like the guitar feels totally different. And is that difference enough to go out and buy a completely different guitar? Logically speaking, definitely not. But for me, and thinking back to my childhood and seeing this guitar in the catalog and wanting it my entire life, I'm not selling this guitar again for that reason alone. Of course, if you want to know more about the Parker Fly or the Parker Nitefly guitar, I have videos about those as well. I'll link them right up here. By the way, I'm Andre Flood, and I'll talk to you soon.